One of the biggest mistakes I see sweater knitters make is not considering the construction method of their sweater when it comes to choosing the right size or the right amount of ease for that sweater. A drop shoulder sweater and a set-in sleeve sweater are two very different things, and they require different measurements and different amounts of ease for a proper fit. So over the next few Knit and Chat episodes, we're going to dive deep into the 4 different sweater construction methods, their advantages and disadvantages, the key measurements and amounts of ease that you need for each of those sweater types, and lots of other information as well. So let's knit and chat together. Hey nerdy knitter, Tanya here. I'm a certified knitting instructor and a master hand knitter, and I want to help you knit sweaters that fit so you can wear them with confidence and pride or give them to your loved ones as well. And we are focusing on sweaters in our upcoming Knit and Chat episodes. So the first Thursday of every month we have a Knit and Chat where we sit and we knit and we chat about a different topic. And I will probably at some point put my knitting down because I can't seem to knit and talk at the same time when I'm recording a video. But you can knit while I chat. And we're going to be talking about different sweater knitting topics. I have just come to discover I like to knit a lot of things, but the thing I love to knit and talk about the most probably are sweaters. So we're going to be discussing those in our upcoming Knit and Chats. For the next 4, including this one, we're going to break down the 4 different types of sweater construction methods. I did a live stream last month that went over them in a broad way, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into each of them. So we'll take a look at each one over the upcoming months, and then also some different key facts about each of those construction methods. So we'll discuss the construction method, how it can be done bottom up or top down, the advantages and disadvantages, the key body measurements that you need to take. Now, you've got to take lots of body measurements when you knit a sweater, but there are a few that are very crucial for different sweater types, and different sweaters require different measurements that are most important. So we'll talk about those. We'll talk about the minimum amount of ease that you need for a proper fit, and also when you go into the too much ease category, when that can work and when it can't work. And then also we will talk about modifications that you might want to make or fit issues that might come up. This is something I see quite often is just looking at the way a sweater fits on a body, and I can see right away whether they chose a size that was too large based on like where it's sitting on their shoulders, or if they should have done some neckline shaping to avoid that choking effect. There's lots of different modifications we can make. So we're going to discuss those as they fit within each of the sweaters that we're going to talk about. This month, we're starting with the Raglan sweater. So I'm wearing a Raglan right now. This is actually the flax sweater pattern. I know if you're familiar with the flax, it looks nothing like it. I don't have any garter stitch running down the sleeve. That pattern is like a crew boat neck. I have a V-neck. I have a different edging. I actually used 2 different sizes I used one size for the body, and I followed instructions for a different size for the sleeve, because I chose a size based on my upper torso to get a better fit. And actually I've lost a bit of weight since I knit it, so it's got a little more ease than I really actually like in a more fitted style sweater. But one thing with a Raglan is you can choose to have something a little more fitted through the body, or something that's much more like sweatshirt oversized. So Raglan is really nice for that. You can have a good range of ease amounts and it'll still look good depending on how you want it to fit. But I'm not going to go through every modification I made, but this is just an example. Like this was the flax sweater. Put a picture of it here. You can see the original. Mine doesn't look like that because of all the modifications that I made. So it is possible to take a pattern and really make a lot of changes to it. But we're not going to be talking about that too much, but we're going to focus on the fit and measurements and ease and different things about a Raglan sweater specifically. So when it comes to our sweater construction methods, we are focused on how the 2 sleeves and the body are joined together. Basically, that's kind of how we differentiate between the different types of sweaters and the different construction methods, is how those 3 tubes are connected in some way, whether they're knit bottom up or top down. Those 3 tubes have to come together in some form. And when that comes to a Raglan, that is usually some sort of, let me find my lines here, some kind of either increase or decrease line at 4 points on the body. So I've got this little mini sweater here, and you can see it a little closer up. We've got these, in this case, increase lines because I was working top down, 2 here and 2 here. And along those lines, you are increasing 8 times. You're increasing twice for the sleeve, twice for the back, once here and once here, twice for this sleeve, here and here, and then here for the front body. So 8 increases on every increase round. And generally how that works in a standard, just pretty basic vanilla raglan is an increase round and then a plain round, an increase round and a plain round. So you get this tight vertical line. Now, this is the problem right away because you cast on and you're knitting those 3 tubes all together, but you might increase at different rates for different parts of your body. Your body doesn't necessarily increase at the same rate as your arms do. So this very standard raglan, that can be an issue right away. That's where we get a more fitted raglan or compound raglans where the shaping rate has been changed. Generally, the shaping is much quicker, so it'll move much more quickly for the body. And then when you get out to about like the shoulder points, you will start doing like the standard 8 increases every other round down to the underarm. And then you might do some more quick shaping for the body as well. So the compound raglan was sort of created to deal with this issue that our body and our arms don't necessarily increase at the same rates like a raglan does. So that increasing at the same rate kind of works if you want an oversized sweater. I mean, it doesn't really matter. You're going to go for an oversized fit, kind of a sweatshirt. It works okay. When you want something slightly more fitted, that doesn't work so well. So that's why we have the compound raglan. Another thing you can do is what I've done with mine. I don't have a compound raglan shaping, but further down, like in the last third or so, I did change my increase rate and I had more increases going on for the body. So instead of like this sharp line, which is very obvious in this little sweater, instead of that sharp line, down in that last little bit, it curves off, which I don't know if you can really tell even holding it out, but when my arms are down, you really can't tell. So that's another way to kind of play around with the shaping is you can have use the standard rate of shaping through the top 2/3. Then in that last third, you start messing things around. So if you need more stitches through the body, then you can add some extra increases down there. If you need more in the sleeves, you can add more on that side. Or if the sleeves are too big in the size you're knitting, you can like skip some of those increase rounds to make the sleeves a little smaller. So a raglan is actually kind of fun to modify because you can do so many different things with it if you want something more fitted. Now, like I said, you can do the oversized and just use like a vanilla pattern where it's like 8 increases every other round, and that'll work just fine to get you a nice sweatshirt style. But if you want something more fitted, you're either looking at a compound raglan or looking at the math to sort of change that increase rate so you get a more fitted fit through here. And then you can like sort of mess around with things down in that lower third where it's not, when I just sit like this, you know, I've got my sweater on, you can't really see like what happened with that raglan line. Even when I hold it out straight, it's a little hard to tell. It does curve a bit, but you can't really tell. So now that we understand how a raglan works, it's increasing. If you're working top down, you've cast on, you're working in the round, and you're increasing at those 8 points for the sleeves and the body all at once. And of course, depending whether it's compound or you're making some changes or plain raglan, then you're going to do all of that increasing. Then you're going to put the sleeves on hold, work the body down to the hem, pick up the sleeves and work those either one at a time or 2 at a time, or work the sleeves first and then work the body if that's your preference. And then maybe there's some neckline finishing if you didn't cast on the neckline right away. Like if you're doing a V-neck, then you're going to start flat, obviously, and then you'll join in the round when the V-neck is done. So you've got to come back and do some shaping there. But we're going to look at a few patterns just to get an idea of what kind of things you can do with a raglan sweater. So here are 3 examples of top-down seamless raglans. So you're casting on at the neckline. I think probably for the first 2, you are working the neckline, like the edging first, and then getting right into the sleeve and the body shaping. And the cumulus blouse has a V-neck, so you're probably going to start that flat and get the V-neck shaping done and then join in the round and finish. But these are all examples, and even if you look at the fit, the fit is very different on each of these 3 sweaters. The flax is much more fitted in this example than compared to the other 2. There's more ease through the body, more positive ease to make them a little more oversized. But one is not right and one is not wrong. It's just your preference for how you want your particular sweater to fit. And you might want to knit a few raglans, and you might want one that's a sweatshirt style. You might want one that's more fitted. That's totally optional too. So what happens here is, yes, you cast on at the neckline. You are working those increases for the 3 tubes. and then you split things and you do the body and the sleeves separately. Then the other option is bottom up, and we have two choices with bottom up. You can knit them seamless like you can top down sweater. You're going to knit your 3 tubes all separately, and then when all of those 3 tubes are long enough to the underarm, you're going to join everything together and then decrease down to the neckline and then finish with the neckline. And then you'll have either like you'll graft the underarms, the body and sleeves together, or you will like do a little seam. That'll be the only seam will be something at the underarm potentially. But another option is to knit the 3 pieces or 4 pieces in this case flat. You'd have a front, a back, and 2 sleeves. So you'd knit all of them flat and then you would sew them together. Now, a lot of people don't seem to like this one so much. They really like that, top down, can try it on as you go kind of thing. And also the bottom up, you can try on as you go. But there is an advantage to knitting in pieces, and when it comes to cables or heavily textured fabric. You want some seams to add some structure to that sweater, and a seamed raglan is a great way to get that additional structure. So this brings us right to our advantages and disadvantages. And these, what somebody considers an advantage, somebody else might consider a disadvantage. So like top-down seamless sweaters, people love them, they cast on, there's not much left at the end except, weaving in some ends, everything's finished. But the disadvantage of that is by the time you're working on that last sleeve, you've got a whole sweater sitting in your lap. For some, that disadvantage outweighs the advantage of having, this top-down seamless construction method. So, we can say advantage and disadvantage, but it really depends on where you fall. There are some of both. You've got that seamless sweater, but the disadvantage of it is, you've got a whole sweater sitting in your lap when you're working on that last sleeve, which might not be so nice. You're having to move the whole thing all the time when you're working in the round on that last sleeve. And also in that seamless construction, you have to be a lot more careful about your yarn choice, especially if it's a textured pattern. We have no seams for structure. That's what seams are there for. Like, they really do make a well-fitting sweater. It helps that sweater like anchor itself and stay in place and stay the size and the shape that it should be. When there are no seams, like in a seamless raglan, you have these decorative lines where you've been increasing or decreasing, but there's no structure here for that sweater. Then you need to be careful about the stitch patterns and about your yarn choice. If it's a very heavily textured design and it's seamless, you really want to pay attention to your yarn. You want something that's very lightweight because there is nothing to support that sweater. And with a lot of textures and cables, you're adding even more yarn because it takes more yarn to make those textures and cables. So if you're using a plant fiber, which is not very elastic and it's also very heavy, you're asking that yarn to do a lot, and it's probably going to end up being a tunic instead of a sweater because it just can't support its own weight after a certain point. So you're looking at wool and acrylic. Those are going to be your 2 best options. If you want some plant fibers, then blend them with some acrylic or wool to add some elasticity and lightness to that yarn. So that is a serious drawback when it comes to a seamless sweater like this, is you have to be very careful about your yarn choice. But of course, you do get the benefit of trying on as you go to make sure the fit is proper. Now, the advantage of knitting in pieces and seaming is obviously the structure. You're getting some really good structure in that garment, and a seamed sweater is going to hold its shape so much better. And it looks good. The fit is always going to stay really nice. If you knit 2 raglan sweaters and one is seamed and one is not, 10 years from now, they might look very, very different. The one with seams is probably still going to look really great because those seams are there to give it some structure and support. The other one, it depends. Like if it's wool and it's a pretty lightweight sweater, it might look fine as well, but they do tend to sag and stretch out with time. And that's just the way it is. When you have seams, they are providing a lot of good structure. So that's something to keep in mind when you're considering the type of sweater that you want to knit. And another kind of silly disadvantage, I think, is sometimes, especially, with colorwork yokes sometimes, but with raglans too, all the fun stuff kind of happens at the top. And then once you've done that, you just have all of that body to knit and all of that sleeve to knit. And for me, that kind of gets a little boring. So I actually prefer bottom up because I can look forward to all of the things that are going to happen. If everything's happening up around the yoke, then the body And the sleeves, I'm still looking forward to that if I'm working bottom up, where, you know, if I'm working top down, I've done all the fun stuff at the beginning. So, I mean, that can be, it's kind of a silly disadvantage, but it is something to think about too. So the next thing we want to talk about are the most important measurements. So here's just a quick little graphic, and you can always go to the Craft Yarn Council as well to just get an idea of the measurements that you should take for your body before you pick a size. This is one of the mistakes I see a lot. Somebody just thinks, oh, I always wear like a large. I'll just gonna knit a large. No, don't do that. I mean, you've probably discovered just in picking out shirts in the store, 3 different large sizes from 3 different, you know, manufacturers are very different sizes, and it doesn't work. And it doesn't work with knitting either. The size numbers are just kind of arbitrary things. What you want to look at are the finished garment measurements and your body measurements and the desired ease that you want to pick the size that you're going to knit. But that is like a whole conversation for a different day. And maybe after we've finished discussing all of the different sweater construction methods, we will go into like a further deep dive on body measurements that are essential for sweaters. But each sweater has a few that are very important, and that varies from one sweater to another. Like there's a couple measurements in a drop shoulder sweater that are pretty important, but in a set and sleeve sweater, there are different measurements that are more important that you probably don't even really need for a drop shoulder. So some of them, there's some overlap as well. Like we do want to start with our bust measurement, but that's just a starting place. That's not like the be all and end all of choosing a pattern size, even though patterns, that seems to be like the standard. Oh, you choose your, you know, measure your bust, add some ease, and then that's your size. There's more to it than that. I mean, that works fine if you're pretty standard body size and you can just knit a sweater pattern and it's going to fit you. For the rest of us, we want to like think about some other things as well. So when it comes to a raglan, there are 3 measurements that are probably the most important. And yes, you need your waist and your hips and blah, blah, blah. But these are the ones that are key to getting a good fit through the underarm to the neckline. This area of your sweater is where you want to focus on good fit. Everything below that point, you can adjust. You can adjust the sleeves, you can adjust the body, but it's at this part where you want to make sure you have a good fit. So there are a couple measurements you want to pay attention to when you're looking at your raglan sweater patterns. First is the armhole yoke depth. I don't like to say armhole because of the way a raglan fits. This is like, I mean, the armhole is technically here, but your sweater might measure from the back neck down to the armhole, or it's hard to say where it was measured. Every designer is going to do that differently, but you want to look at that pattern. And the larger you are, sometimes that number gets to be a little crazy long. Like I'm on the larger side, but that doesn't mean my armhole has suddenly gotten super long either. Like this measurement has not changed no matter how much weight I've gained or lost. Like it pretty much stays the same. Might be a little extra fat under there, but not a lot. But for some reason, you know, it just seems to be standard as your sizes go up, the armhole depth goes lower and lower, which in some sizes, if I knit to the armhole depth they want me to, my armhole depth is going to be down like somewhere either around my bust or down at my waist, which is very long and not something I particularly want to wear. One of the issues with that is every time you raise your arm, if your armhole depth is way down there, the whole sweater is coming up as well, and you're like flashing everybody your tummy or whatever, and we don't want to do that. Well, unless you do. If you want to have like super deep armhole, knock yourself out, do what you want. In general, I don't really want that. So I always check the armhole depth of the sweater compared to my armhole depth. And I adjust accordingly if possible, because I don't want, in general, something that's very, very long. I want it to stay. Like this one, it's probably, I mean, my underarm is right here. So there is some fabric under there. Not a ton, but some. I mean, I can stretch it and pull it down, but you can see it bounces right back up to where it wants to be. So there's probably at least 1.5 inches under there. Now, so that's something I pay attention to. I look at the armhole depth. Now, what if a pattern does not have a schematic and tell you this information? You can suss it out for yourself, and I will do this. I am annoyed when a pattern doesn't have a schematic for me to use, but we can look at like the number of rows you have to work for the full length of the yoke. So where you're casting on, and then when you're dividing body and sleeves, and count up that number of rows, and then divide by the 1-inch row gauge, and that will tell you how long the yoke depth is for that particular sweater, and you can compare it to your body and see if that's going to work or if you need to adjust. Now, the next measurement that's important is your full bust or your upper torso. Now, I don't want to go into a deep dive about this because I've talked about it many times, and we'll probably do another video in the future. Knitting patterns are written with a B cup in mind, and that's not talking about bra size, that's talking about sewing pattern sizes. I don't sew that much to know enough about it, but it basically boils down to they're saying that in a standard body size, the upper torso and the full bust, there's a measurement difference of 2 inches. So if you are a 32-inch bust, then your upper torso will be 30 inches. Patterns are assuming that you have that 2-inch difference. So if the pattern is written for a 42-inch bust, then it's assuming your upper torso is 40 inches. Now, I mean, some women fall within that range of about 2 inches of difference. Many women do not. You know, you might have very broad shoulders and a very narrow bust where like this measurement might actually be larger than your bust. You might have a very full bust. I do. I've got like a 5-inch difference between those two numbers. So using my full bust measurement is not a great indicator of the size I should choose because that fluctuates. The fleshy areas of our body can fluctuate. The skeletal areas with this upper torso measurement doesn't fluctuate as much. So you choose the one, and I've got other videos that talk about what to do like for modifying for the full bust, but you want to start with a size that uses your upper torso measurement or your full bust, depending. If you're just a 2-inch difference, then go ahead, use your full bust. If you have broad shoulders, if you have a very full bust, then start with that upper torso measurement and plan to make some modifications for your full bust. But you want something that's going to fit you here. And if you choose something that fits you here, it might end up way too big up here. So start with that upper torso measurement. So upper torso or full bust, depending on your body shape. And that armhole depth, that's important. And then the third is also the bicep circumference. Because one thing I've discovered when I'm knitting a raglan, when I use my upper torso measurement, I end up choosing a smaller size to fit my frame. But then I have like a lot of extra under my arm. So when I look at the sleeve circumference for that size, sometimes it's too small. And I have to go up like a size or 2 for the sleeve to fit very properly. But if I do that, I go up a full size or like those 2 sizes for my sleeve to fit, then it's too big through the body, which is okay if I want like an oversized sweatshirt. That can work. What I usually end up doing, what I did in this case was I did a Franken sweater. I combined 2 different sizes, one size for the sleeve and a different size for the body to get a fit that I preferred in my sweater. But those are the 3 key measurements that you want to start with. When it comes to a raglan specifically, you need to know that yoke depth to make sure it's not going to be too long or too short. You need to know that full bust or upper torso measurement so you can choose the right size. And then also your bicep measurement, because you want it, once you've chosen a size, you want to check that sleeve circumference to make sure it's going to fit you well without being too big or too tight. I know it seems that this is starting to get a little confusing. That's why I have developed a whole course around this. I've taught it with 4, I think, different groups of students now, and it's available now for self-study on-demand class. It's specifically for top-down raglans and circular yokes. So if you like to knit those styles of sweaters, but you want a little more like in-depth conversation, I walk you through the whole process. Like I show you how I knit this sweater. I walk you through like my whiteboard demonstration, how I figured out my numbers, all of that, adding waist shaping, changing to a V-neck. Everything's covered. So if you're interested in like really learning to modify, then I'm going to put a link down below and you can check out that course. See, I did it again. I put my knitting down. So I'm going to pick it back up and try to talk and knit at the same time. But once we have those measurements, so you've taken your body measurements, you have the most important ones like starred, so you know what's most important for your sweater to fit. The next thing to talk about is ease. Like how much ease should that sweater have? And the different sweater construction methods need different amounts of ease. You don't need the same amount of ease in a drop shoulder as you do in a set-in sleeve or a raglan or a set-in sleeve. So we just need to briefly discuss this. So when I talk about ease, for those who aren't sure what that is, positive and negative ease. So it's basically saying how much distance is there between the garment and the body. So this hat, pretty tight fitting, it's got negative ease. I have to like pull it and slide it over my head. It's smaller than my body. My sweater, pull it out, I can pull. You can see there's ease through that sweater. So there's positive ease through that sweater. So it's larger than my body. Your socks should be smaller so they're going to stay in place on your feet. So negative ease means smaller, positive means means it's larger. No ease means it's like the same size as your body. Like if you were like a camisole underneath something, it might be your exact body measurements or thereabouts, so that would have no ease. Now the Craft Yarn Council has some generalized standards. I'll put them up on the screen here for like how they should fit your body. Like a very close fit would be between 2 to 4 inches smaller than your best bust or chest measurement. Close fit would be body skimming, like actual measurements. Classic fit, comfortable fit is like 2 to 4 inches larger than that bust or chest measurement. A loose fit is 4 to 6 inches larger. Oversized is 6 inches or more. So this is just sort of a generalization. Like it's not going to be like a set-in sleeve. You're not going to choose a size that gives you 6 inches of ease. It's just going to be way too big through the shoulders. But this is more of a general guideline of like the number of inches would kind of tell you like how that sweater is going to fit. But each style of sweater requires different amounts of ease for the best fit. So here's an example of that. So here is just like the minimum ease that you need for a sweater. You can have more ease than this chart tells you, but you want to at least start with these numbers. So we're looking at Raglan specifically. So that is between 2 to 4 inches of positive ease. So your sweater should be 2 to 4 inches at a minimum larger than you. So if you're using your full bust measurement, you're going to look at your full bust. You're going to add either 2, 3, 4 inches at a minimum, and then you'll find a size, a finished garment size in the pattern that is closest to that number. If you have a bigger difference between your upper torso and your full bust, you're going to use that upper torso measurement and add that 2 to 4 inches of minimum ease, and then look for a size. Of course, you can have a lot more. With a Raglan, the minimum is 2 to 4 inches. We need that much so we can move. If like I use my upper torso measurement, if I chose a size that gave me like no ease, it would be hard to move, even with like a sweater that has some give to it. If I chose a size that was like my upper torso measurement exactly with no ease, I'd feel it every time I'd move. Like I would feel the fabric like bunching and hurting. It wouldn't feel nice. So you need to have a little bit of ease for movement. You need to be able to move your arms and your shoulders and stuff like that. So 2 to 4 inches as your base, either for your upper torso or your full bust. So you know that measurement and you add that minimum amount of ease. Now, if you're going for the oversized fit, then just look at that Craft Yarn Council chart again. So 6 or more inches is going to give you like more of an oversized sweatshirt style fit. And that is fine too. But just remember, the more ease you add, the bigger the whole sweater is going to be. And you can start with like something more fitted and then add more down at the bottom if you want more ease there. And you can combine the two. So it's more fitted here and more ease through the body. It's up to you. It's your sweater. So that brings us to our last discussion is like fit issues and modifications. Once you have chosen your size based on, your upper torso or your full torso, your full bust, and then you've checked the sleeve circumference, then this is where you can start thinking about how to modify. In my example, I did have to do some major modifications because I chose an upper torso size that had a very small arm circumference. So I had to go up like 2 sizes, I think, for the sleeve. And I could have gone up and just knit that size sweater for like an oversized fit. I didn't want that though. So I only used the sleeve numbers, but I used the body numbers for the smaller size. So I did what we would call like a Franken sweater. I combined 2 sizes. But there are other issues you can run into when it comes to especially a seamless sweater. If you're knitting in pieces, you can do like all of your neckline. You can shape the neckline so you don't have anything to deal with. When you do everything in the round, either top down, bottom up, whatever you're doing, and everything front and back is kind of all finishing together, your front and back neckline becomes an issue at this point. So specifically speaking of seamless raglans and circular yokes, where you're joining in the round and knitting everything all at once. What happens is our back neck and our front neck are not at the same height. So if you use your hand and feel around, feel where like that bump on your neck is. Mine is like right here. It's where your neck is meeting like your shoulders. Everything is right there. My front neck though, it's down here. Can you see how far apart those 2 fingers are? A couple inches at least. So if you knit a sweater that has no difference between the back neck and the front rides up to hit right here to accommodate that bump on your back neck, basically. So if you've ever knit one of these sweaters and you realize, you hate the way it sits here and you're constantly pulling it down because it feels like it's choking you, it's because there was no neck shaping. Now, if you're knitting flat or you're doing a V-neck, you've shaped the neck, so that's not an issue. But when you're knitting something in the round, like one of these like in the round sweaters, then this one I do have shaping, so I have to kind of mess around with it. But if I were to hold it straight like this, it looks like no shaping, because you know, you're cast on, you start knitting, there is nothing going on to differentiate the front from the back. So this is one of the big drawbacks to this style of sweater. So you want to incorporate some neck shaping. The pattern might include it. It might not. If it doesn't, it's not hard to add. I'm going to do a video in the future on how to add that. But I did add a little bit. You can see the front, it drops a little bit lower than the back, just slightly. But I mean, it's just a little sample sweater. But you would drop it maybe an inch, maybe an inch and a half, maybe 2 inches, whatever you want to sort of like drop the front, raise the back so you don't get that sort of choking effect. And that's what you want to go for. You want there to be a difference between the front neck and the back neck. So sometimes patterns will have that, sometimes they won't, but it's one of the easiest things you can pop in. You're going to like cast on, do your edging, and then you do some short row neck shaping along the back to add more fabric to the back and drop the front neck. So you can research it. I will have a video coming out soon. I also have it in my course. I explain how to add that to any sweater pretty much. But that is something you want to add when you are doing one of these seamless sweaters, a seamless raglan where there is no neck shaping. You want to add it in. It's one of the modifications you should definitely learn how to do. Now, another major issue is like with that basic raglan is everything, all of the increases are at the same rate. And we are not shaped like our sleeves and our body to increase at the same rate. So you might want to adjust the rate of shaping so you can get more fabric through the body. So you might want to turn it into a compound raglan, so where you're increasing much more quickly to add stitches across the front or the back. And then you go into the standard rate down to the underarm, and then you might do more quick increasing to add more fabric to the body. So that's something to think about. If you're doing a more fitted raglan to get a better fit, is to think about how that shaping should happen so it will fit you better. Now, another issue is yoke depth. If the depth of the yoke is too long, then your underarm is kind of down here somewhere. So every time you lift your arm, your whole sweater pulls up with it. I lift my arm, my sweater is pretty much staying in place because my armhole, you know, everything is up here. But the further down that is, the more it's connected down in this part of the sweater. So I lift my arm and it all wants to come up. We don't want that. I mean, if you do, you do, that's fine. But I don't like my sweaters to be riding up. So I want to always check that armhole depth and make sure that it's going to fit my body well. And I might have to make an adjustment in the depth of the sweater, which means I might have to change my increase or decrease rate if I only have so many rows to work with to get the circumference I want and the depth I want at the same time. Now, another issue is if you are knitting a sweater that has less ease and your armhole is too deep, then you end up with what's called like a crumb catcher. What happens is like the sweater is more fitted. So you might notice this, like if you've knit a sweater and you have to keep like sort of tugging it down because it sort of rides up right here. If it has like very little ease, it's got nowhere to go. Like if this part of the sweater is too long, but and also like not too tight, because you can wear a sweater that has less ease, but it's got nowhere to go. So it kind of keeps pulling itself back up. So you end up with like a bit of fabric. I've heard it called a crumb catcher right here, where it kind of like a U shape that sits there because this fabric is bunching up because it can't drop down because the depth of the yoke is too long, and then your bust is keeping it from like pulling itself down because of like the ease through the bust. So you end up with fabric here that like just kind of sits and it looks awkward and you're constantly pulling it down. So that is an issue with a depth that is not the right length for your body. You would have to, if it is doing that, then that depth of the sweater is too long for your armhole depth. So I hope this has given you an idea of what goes into like choosing the right size. It's not just a matter of, oh, I like this sweater, let me check my bust measurement and add some ease and get going. There's more to it. If you want to get a better fit to your sweater, you've got to think of all these things. Maybe your upper torso measurement, your bicep circumference. You have to think about those different measurements and the fit that you want for your sweater, whether you want it to be oversized or more fitted. So I know there's a lot that we talked about. We're going to discuss in the next video, we'll dive into circular yokes and how that works. So when that comes out, I'll make sure to come back and put a link right here for that. But if you want to dive deeper into this topic, especially with top-down Raglan sweaters, then I've got a whole course that walks through the whole process of really taking a pattern, any pattern, and customizing it to fit your body really well. So I'll have a link for that down below as well, and I'll see you in the next video.